Ambassador Sibal, if you look at the overall world, it's a very different world to what it was when you were the ambassador to Russia and when the SCO was first being spoken about. India itself has obviously risen a lot in power and in status, and its importance has grown. China become far more aggressive, perhaps far more domineering, far more dominating, and the imprint of China being very clearly felt across the world. And when it comes to Russia itself, there are some who would argue that it's starting to become a bit of a junior partner to China after the war in Ukraine, very heavily dependent on China in many ways. So, would it be fair to say that it is somewhat incongruous for India to be sitting inside an organization which seems to be so heavily dominated by China as it is right now? Russia almost coming across as a somewhat subservient entity to China at the present moment.
You see, there's a division of labor, if you like, between Russia and China and Central Asia. And they have devised a mechanism by which there is a balance of interest there. On the security side, it's Russia that is dominant. They have the CSTO, which looks after the security of many of these countries. And then you have the economic part where clearly China dominates. The second thing is that there are a lot of reservations in Central Asia about China. They don't want to become prisoners of China. They don't want the Chinese to just take over their economies as they have done. Because the manner in which China operates, they destroy any local production. They also want, therefore, to have some kind of a balance within the SCO, and that is where India also potentially comes in. That's the second part. The third is there are a lot of Kazakhs in Xinjiang. So there are ethnic issues involved there. And at the end of the day, these are Islamic countries. One must not forget that. The manner in which China treats its Muslim minority could not be lost upon them entirely, though, of course, they themselves are very open-minded and secular, but not really. The other thing is that there are a lot of immigrants, or whatever you like, from Central Asia into Russia. And they, in fact, are dominating some sectors of the economy, as I have seen myself, especially fresh fruits, vegetables, and stuff like that. They send a lot of remittances home. This is not the case with China. And therefore, there is a huge economic linkage between these countries. Now, it is true that after Ukraine and the fact that Russia is trying to protect the Russian-speaking minorities, there's a bit of an issue in Kazakhstan. But also don't remember when there was an uprising against the president. Who came in to restore the present president is the Russians.
Right.
So there are all these, see, in all these countries and in all these situations, there are nuances and everything else, but you have to look at the total picture and not simplify to say that, you know, Russia has become a junior partner or subsidiary or lost all power. It's not true. It's not true. But one part, of course, is true that China economically has become very dominant, no doubt.
All right, looking at some of the other factors that could start to play out in the SCO, I know, Indrani, that there were a lot of companies in Europe who were somewhat startled by a statement made by a Chinese diplomat, which obviously the Chinese have been trying to walk back a little bit, but a statement essentially saying that, you know, the borders of the USSR should be remembered and the sovereignty of some of the countries that were once in the USSR are in some way not defined. Now, the Baltic states and others have been more than a little bit concerned about that. I'm sure that statement will be causing a certain amount of ripples in the SCO. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, they were all also former USSR republics. So somewhat in the same position. Are they scratching their heads and saying, where is all of this going?
You know, Chinese diplomats are not known to be speaking off the cuff, if you know what I mean. Sort of personal statements are really not their forte. So yes, and the question then arises, I mean, is China doing this as a unilateral gesture, or are they doing it with a silent prod from Moscow? We don't know. But the fact remains that it is a matter of concern.
Ambassador Sibal, one last word from you then. If I understood you correctly, you seem to be saying, look, there are lots of dynamics and lots of things that are going to be playing out, especially with Pakistan and China. But it's better for India to be sitting inside the SCO and trying to shape what is happening than sitting outside it and just complaining.
China is sitting on our borders. 50,000 troops, 60,000 troops, God knows, 100,000 troops, some say, all across the border. We are talking to them. We've had 18 rounds of discussions bilaterally. So what's the difficulty in being in a multilateral organization along with China? Our defense minister has met the Chinese defense minister in the past. Our foreign minister has met the Chinese foreign minister several times. So that dialogue continues. And if that dialogue continues within a larger forum, it is not unhelpful. And number two, it is part of the understanding in the SCO that bilateral issues will not be raised. And one of the reasons why there were some concerns about bringing Pakistan in was that Pakistan will start raising bilateral issues with India. But this is looked down upon. So the SCO has developed a kind of an ambience in which this is discouraged. You remember that in one of the meetings, the Pakistanis tried to show a flag, a map of Pakistan which showed wrongly the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the Russians asked them to take it down. So I don't think that this is any problem. We have to look at the long term.
Right.
We must, as a regional country, as a rising country, have a foot in every possible multilateral organization. So that our influence is felt and we are able to steer the discussions as much as possible in our interests. That is the purpose.
Right, Indrani. Now, everywhere in the world there's been a lot of talk about how India has been managing a tightrope walk ever since the Ukraine war really started. And that is being underlined by all of these meetings that are happening. SCO right now, Quad's going to be meeting shortly. Then you're going to have the G20 happening at the same time. Do you think this tightrope walk is sustainable and necessary in a multipolar world? Or do you think India is going to be forced to choose sides at some point or the other?
It is, Vikram, we have no choice. The world is, we're watching the world in a sort of a geopolitical flux. And it is as important for us to be part of the Quad as it is for us to be in the SCO. Because these are, as well as the BRICS, we keep forgetting the BRICS, but the BRICS is, again, the BRICS, another organization that's dominated by China, but we need to be there. We need to be in the room. We need to be in the rule-making space for all of these discussions. Just to say that because we don't like the Chinese and right now the Russians are a headache, that we shouldn't be in the room? Absolutely not. In fact, we should not give countries like Pakistan oxygen in organizations like this. So absolutely. So we should be there. And it's important for us to be able to steer these organizations.
All right, former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal and the CEO of the Ananta Aspen Center, Indrani Bagchi, thank you both so much for joining us with that perspective.